4 prohibitions with writing. A. Any form of writing, even if it's temporary, for example, on dust or sand, erasing, drawing and artwork, and photography. Okay, one may not write on a steamed up window, but it may be wiped with the hand. You can't write, but you can wipe it. Okay, that I didn't know, because it's not proper erasing. It's not ink or anything. We're using proper erasing action. One may open and close books which have words formed on the page edges when the book is closed, even though letters are broken or composed upon opening and closing. One is permitted to break cookies or other food on which words or letters are inscribed. However, if one is cutting a cake which is decorated with lettering made from a different ingredient from the cake, one should avoid cutting or breaking through the letters themselves. Rabbinic prohibitions on marriage, divorce, and the granting of loans were introduced as a precaution against writing. Okay, so that's writing and erasing.
What happens?
Did you hear me?
Yeah, what happens with medication?
Okay.
They print
I can't hear you though, but I don't know why.
Can Gavin hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Kevin,
can you hear me?
Audio test.
Kevin.
Yeah. Now can you hear me?
Anyway.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, it's also very faint. Now that's okay.
Can you hear us?
Okay, my audio is working.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you very faint. I don't know why.
I tell you what, plug in your Bluetooth again for listening to the show.
Yeah, because you're not talking now. At least for listening, it's perfect.
Bluetooth for listening. Bluetooth.
I can hardly hear you.
I'll send him a message.
Bluetooth.
No, you can't.
Bluetooth.
I don't know what you're saying. Type right for me in the chat. Damon.
I am.
Eraser, yes. That was a razor, not an eraser. Okay, maybe I should let me use the Bluetooth again then. Okay.
Yes, use your Bluetooth.
Okay. This happened. Let's try it again. Let's see.
Can you hear us
see
now?
If it's better now. Maybe it'll be better with Bluetooth. Let's try.
Can you hear us now?
Very faint. Let me just maybe Bluetooth. No, it's just weird. It is.
The volume?
Guys, hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Gavin, can you hear me?
Perfect. Can you hear us?
Arthur? No, it's very weird. This
is not great.
Do you want to reboot your computer?
Yeah, it sounds like you just need to reboot it. Your Bluetooth's gone wacky. Just reboot it.
Now can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Now all of a sudden it's anyway. So did you hear what the halachas? Could you hear what I said about the halachas about erasing and writing? Perfect. Okay, that's fine then. Okay, good. Okay.
Can you hear us?
You don't have to erase that part of the recording. You can keep it. Okay, Damon.
Okay, can you hear us though?
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yeah, saying
did you get my joke, Damon?
Yeah, I got your joke. It's cutting edge. All right.
Totally.
Yeah, I pointed to the color blue, and then I pointed to my tooth.
Yeah, eraser, not eraser. Yes.
All right. This is the sign of the old age home, Shady Ponds. All right, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen for a new Mishnah. Just give me a second. All right, Art, you don't have to read it, but can you see it? Okay, I'm going to read it. The Mishnah discusses the case where there is uncertainty as to the degree of the damage's liability. If an ox gored a cow that had been pregnant and killed it, and the cow's fetus was found dead at its side, but it is not known whether the cow gave birth to the fetus before the ox gored it, and the fetus' death is unrelated to the goring, or it gave birth after the ox gored it, and the goring caused it to miscarry. The owner of the ox must pay half damages for the cow, obviously half payment damages because we're talking about a tongue-attacking ox, and that's a case of certainty, and 1/4 damages for the offspring, because as Sumchus says, that is a case of uncertainty. And when there's a case of uncertainty, then what happens is the damaged party and the damager both compromise by half. Okay? And the 1/4 damages for the offspring. Similarly, if a cow that had been pregnant gored an ox, and after the goring, the cow's offspring was found at its side, but it is not known whether the cow gave birth before it gored the ox, and the offspring was uninvolved in the goring, or it gave birth after it gored the ox, and the offspring participated in the goring as a fetus. The damaged party collects half damages from the body of the cow and 1/4 damages from the body of the offspring. Now, I just want to explain what this means. We've used two opposite scenarios. The one where a pregnant cow is the victim, and the other one where the pregnant cow was the perpetrator. Okay? Now, it's obviously not saying that a fetus that has no brains, that can't even think for itself and gets the nutrients from the parent, that's participating in the goring in terms of let's plot to injure the ox. There's no participation in terms of intellect. What we mean by participation is that you pay on the attacking animal, and therefore did it participate in the act from a time perspective, so that you take into account the added value of the fetus or the added value of the mother in terms of the weight capacity bearing the fetus, because both parties were involved with the goring, or is the mother considered to have given birth first and then gored the ox, irrespective of the fetus at which it gave birth to. Okay? Now, we notice in the first part of the Mishnah it uses the term fetus. In the second part of the Mishnah it uses the term offspring. The reason being is that a fetus hasn't yet come to birth of a calf. In the case where a calf was birthed by a mother, either before it attacked the ox or after, it means that the offspring came from a fetus to a healthy offspring with regards to a calf. Okay? But with regards to the fetus is dead. It never lives long enough to become an offspring. In other words, a viable calf. Fine. I've shared that. These are the opinions of Sumchus, and we're going to analyze this Mishnah. Okay, well done, guys. We're on 46A2. We're on chapter 5. Yeshikayach, guys. Okay. Now, I hope I explained the Mishnah clearly. I didn't want to just read it word by word. I wanted to just get you guys a little bit involved with what we're dealing with here. Fine. Now, the Gemara has a question. The Gemara notes that our Mishnah reflects a minority opinion. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, this Mishnah is the opinion of Sumchus, who said that money whose ownership lies in doubt is divided by the litigants. But the sages say that this is a major principle in judgment. The one to exact payments from his fellow bears the burden of proof. Okay, so they're at opposite opinions. Sumchus is saying when there's a doubt between the damaged party and the attacker as to what exactly transpired, the damaged party takes half, and basically the damager has to pay half of the disputed amount. Now, in whose favor is this, the damaged party or the damager? There's a dispute. The rabbis basically say that the burden of proof lies to the claimant. If you say I owe you money, you've got to prove I owe you money. You've got to prove you've got a legitimate claim. In other words, if there's any doubt, the onus is on you to prove if you want to extract money from me. That's the view of the rabbis. Sumchus is a minority opinion. a minority not to show him disrespect. On the contrary, to show him respect. You must know what a great man he is, the fact that they can quote somebody who has a lone opinion. But his opinion is something slightly different. He basically says, look, that at the end of the day, regarding situations where the disposition of certain money is inherently in doubt as a result of circumstances, like in our case, where the finding of the dead fetus near a gored cow automatically triggers the question of whether it died as a result of the goring. Okay? Herein, in similar situations, Simchus views that the two claims as having equal strength, and therefore rules that the money in question is divided, because there's no evidence either way. So both could be right. So when there is no inherent doubt and the question arises merely from a plaintiff's claim, I'll give you an example. Reuven says that a garment presumed to have been Shimon's is actually his. Since Simchus can see that Shimon actually has the garment itself, he doesn't require the defendant to divide the amount in question. He places, exactly like the rabbi, the burden of place on the plaintiff. That's in Bava Kamma in 2b and 97b. So another qualification of Simchus's rule is that it applies only when the disputed money or object is not in the defendant's possession. Why? Because, Gavin, if I've got a car and you say it's your car, how did I get it? Why would you give it to me? So the thing of it is, possession is evidence that it's mine. If you want to show that you had ownership and you can provide receipts and I have to provide receipts, well, then that's a doubt. But then you have to bring evidence. You can't just claim that something in somebody else's possession is yours. So when it's in possession of a particular person, then it's not in dispute. But if it's in a public area, then it's in dispute. So basically, you say that there was a book of yours that I left in the library, okay? Now, the library is a neutral place. So you've got to actually prove that it's not the library's number one. And it's a public place like a library is a bit problematic, actually, because the library is an ownership. But let's just say a book in the park or something like that that's found. You say it's yours and I say it's mine. So in this particular case, it's not a problem because basically, Simchus is saying in this case it's found in an ownerless field, or it's not found in the field of where the ox belongs. So, for example, my dead cow, and the fetus is next to my dead cow in my patch of land. There's not a dispute there. As far as that's concerned, you don't have a right to have your ox on my property. Does that make sense? You don't have a right to have your ox on my property. So there's nothing in dispute. If we're in a public walkway and my cow is dead with the fetus of my cow next to it, then there can be a proper claim because it's neutral territory. Okay, very clear. So Simchus is viewing that if there's no proof either way, both the damaged party and the damager takes a compromise at the damaged party getting half. Now, Kevin, I asked before whose favor this is in. You answered correctly, but the reason wasn't correct, but your answer was correct. You said it's in the defendant's benefit. Why? Because according to the rabbis, as the defendant, if you don't have any view and you've got an ox and a dead fetus is next to it, and you can see a big goring into the cow, okay, and the fetus is next to the cow, we can see that your cow has been gored, and I'm entitled to pay you half damages because I've got the tum ox. But I can't say for sure whether or not the fetus was miscarried as a result of your ox being shocked by the physiological experience of being gored by my ox, or the fact of it is your fetus basically gave birth before the goring. And in that case, the rabbis say, well, why should I pay for the fetus unless you can prove it miscarried? But Simchus is saying, no, we don't know if it miscarried as a result of the ox attacking, or alternatively, if it gave birth before the goring and it just happened to have had a non-viable fetus. So it's in the benefit of the defendant, of the damaged party, because here he's at least getting half. Otherwise, the damaged party has to furnish evidence. Is that clear, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's go on. And in the latter case, the damaged party cannot collect anything from the body of the offspring unless he proves it participated in the goring. So in other words, the rabbis say the one seeking to exact payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof. Sumcha says when money lies in doubt, it's divided by the litigants. So the Gemara accepts Shmuel's assertion and proceeds to analyze the language of the sages that he quoted. Why do I need the sages to say the preface, this is a major principle in judgment? What is a major principle in judgment? The rabbinic opinion that one who seeks to exact payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof. And the Gemara replies, it is necessary to teach the extent to which the principle applies. That even if the damaged party says, you are certainly liable, and the damager says, I'm possibly exempt, the one seeking to exact payment from his fellow, the damaged party bears the burden of proof. So what we're saying is the owner of the calf, Kevin's the owner of the calf. He claims to have been present at the goring, and he said he saw that his as a result of his cow being gored by my ox, it miscarried. Okay? And I, the owner of the ox, say, I don't know what transpired, either because I was there and too preoccupied or in shock to notice exactly when the miscarriage occurred. That's according to Rashba, or I didn't see it. I didn't notice, or I wasn't there. So a claim of certainty, in other words, the damaged party says certainly it's a miscarriage, and therefore because my cow suffered a miscarriage, you owe me for the fetus, doesn't qualify as a basis for exacting property from one's fellows, according to the rabbis. The damaged party must bring witnesses to corroborate his claim. Tosfot and Rashba assert that this applies in cases such as ours, where the defendant's claim of possibly is strong and the plaintiff's claim of certainly is weak. Okay, so the defendant is who, guys? It's the owner of the ox. I'm saying I didn't see it. It maybe happened, it maybe didn't. That's strong. Why? Because unless you've got evidence to the contrary, your claim that it certainly happened is weak, because you stand to benefit from that. Therefore, you're not an objective party unless you bring objective witnesses. Okay. So, another explanation of the expression, this is a major principle, comes to include. Alternatively, the sages meant to allude to another novel application of the principle in accordance of that which was stated. If one sells an ox to his fellow and it is found to be a gorer, okay, this is considered a purchase made in error, and the seller must refund the buyer's money. Okay, so let me just explain to you what we're talking about here. We're trying to see another case in which it applies that the burden of proof has to rest upon here. Has to prove upon the damaged party. Okay, so we're saying here, look, I bought an ox from Gavin. Okay, Gavin is the seller, and Kev, you falling asleep? No, I saw your eyes close. I can't.
Scratching my head. I'm not.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm wide awake. Scratching my head.
Okay, no, I just didn't want to leave you behind. So what I was going to say, Kev, is that we're taking another case. Say Gavin sells me an ox, okay, and I'm the buyer, and I found out after he sells it to me that this ox is a aggressive gorer. Now, I've got a complaint because I'm turning around and I say, the sale is null and void. You didn't tell me, you sold me under false pretenses. Yeah?
Like a latent defect, a misrepresentation.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a latent defect, a misrepresentation, exactly that. And Gavin says, what are you talking about? I sold you the ox for slaughtering. What do we mean by slaughtering? An ox that is a bichagora, as Rav Eliezer said, is about as good for the knife as anything, meaning it's dangerous. You don't want it around. You don't want to use it as a work animal. You don't want it around other animals or people. So I say Gavin owes me my money back because he sold me and he didn't. And I found out from the community this ox is a gora. And Gavin said, I sold it to you for slaughtering, meaning I never sold it to you as a working animal. And since you bought it for slaughtering, what difference does it make in terms of the animal's nature? You don't have to work with it. In that particular case, Sumchus, as you know, would say what? Is that unless you have evidence, I'm assuming it'd say you come to some middle road. We don't know what Sumchus would say, but we know what the sages would say. The sages would say two different opinions according to Rav and Shmuel. Rav said, who represents obviously some of the sages, that this is considered a purchase made in error, and the seller must refund the buyer's money. Okay? But Shmuel said the seller can tell the buyer, I sold it to you for slaughter, and thus its violent nature does not nullify the sale. According to Shmuel, in order for the buyer to exact a refund from the seller, the buyer must prove that he purchased the ox for plowing. Shmuel may interpret the sage's statement, this is a major principle, as alluding to the point. Okay? So clearly, who's going like that according to the sages? Shmuel. Because Shmuel said the burden of proof lies on the grieved party to say that he deserves a refund, and he needs to basically say what purpose he bought it for if he wants a refund. Why? Because then the money is where? In the hands of the seller. If it was in a trust account, you can reverse the transaction. But the minute it's in the hands of the seller, it's deemed now to be finalized. Okay? So Shmuel said, no, the buyer has to actually prove that he bought it for plowing. And Rav said, no, he doesn't. Because what makes you think it's representation? And there's answers that are going to be brought forward. The first answer is, why should the matter be doubt in all? This is because let us see whether the buyer is a man who usually purchases oxen for plowing, or is a man who usually purchases oxen for slaughtering. If he is a farmer who requires oxen for plowing, it should be obvious that this was his purpose. And if he is a butcher who requires oxen for slaughtering, then it should be obvious that this was his purpose. Okay? In other words, look at the buyer's track record history of behavior of purchase. Right. That makes sense, but there's a problem. What's the problem? Because your dispute between Rav and Shmuel is needed only regarding a case where the buyer is a man who commonly purchases oxen for this and that, in other words, for plowing and for slaughtering. In other words, he might be a farmer that has an abattoir. Might be. Many farmers have an abattoir. Therefore, the purpose of the purchase cannot be deduced from the buyer's behavioral pattern. It says here the buyer's identity. Well, I suppose identity means if he's a farmer, you know what he's going to use it to plow. Identity, if he's a butcher, he's going to slaughter. But let's use the word behavioral pattern just to be easier. Okay. So, in other words, if he has a habit of buying for both reasons, you can't deduce it from that fact. Next, the Brisa asks further, but let us see what the purchase price was. If the price of the ox fit for plowing, then the buyer obviously bought it for plowing. And if it was a price of an ox fit only for slaughter, then the buyer obviously bought it for slaughter. So
it would obviously be more expensive for plowing than it would be for slaughter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the price would be indicative. So the price would be indicative of what actually transpired.
Exactly, Gavin. I see the cream has worked wonders for you. So exactly.
Yeah, so.
So as Gavin said, something that's already doesn't have a purpose for working obviously gets a much lower rate because you cannot use it for anything productive. So therefore, things for slaughtering are cheaper than active worker, in the term of an animal as a work plow horse or plow cow or whatever. So Gavin said, right, if it's used for plowing, it should be more expensive. So surely we just look at the price. And the Gemara answers, the dispute between Rav and Shmuel is needed only in regarding a case where meat became expensive and consequently the price of an ox suitable for slaughter stood at the same price that an ox is suitable for plowing. Okay? Thus, the purchase price cannot be used to determine the purpose of the purchase. The Gemara asks further, they said, if there is no money available in the seller's possession for the buyer to collect a refund from him, why does Rav say that the buyer returns the ox? Okay? Let him retain the ox in lieu of his money, for as people say, from one who is in your debt, collect even bran as payment. Since even according to Rav, the buyer will in all likelihood retain his ox, what is the point of the dispute? So the Gemara is saying, look, if the guy doesn't have any money and he spent your money, then you might as well keep the ox and sell it for slaughtering because the guy ain't got the money to give it to you back. He doesn't have the money for refund. He blew it already. So what are you going to get for payment for your ox? He'll give you your ox back. So you might as well keep your ox. So then obviously we're saying we're not talking about that case. We're talking about where the dispute is necessary only regarding a case where there is money in the seller's possession from the buyer to collect from him. Having clarified the case to which the dispute pertains, the Gemara expresses the opinions. Rav said that this is considered a purchase made in error, for according to Rav, we follow the principle of the majority. What does that mean? The majority of people who purchase oxen purchase them for plowing. Okay? He's talking about live oxen. Yeah. Okay? Because if an ox is dead, you're buying it for its meat because it's already been, partitioned by a butcher, and I wouldn't say exactly wrapped in styrofoam and plastic. That only came in the 20th century. But it was certainly put into its parts of what cut of the meat it was, etc. So it was unlikely that somebody would buy a live animal only to go to the trouble of slaughtering it and partitioning it. So since most people buy a live animal for its ability to work for the person in terms of plowing, that is the golden rule. So that assumption is that the buyer did not wish to purchase an ox suitable only for slaughter, and his money is refunded. Okay? But Shmuel said that the seller can tell the buyer, I sold it to you for slaughter, and we do not follow the principle of the majority. According to Shmuel, when do we follow the principle of majority? Only in regard to matters of ritual law. So what do we mean ritual law? So you've got 10 butcheries in your suburb. Okay, you live in Maya Sharin. And one, I'll get you right now, Kev, and 9 of the butcheries are glad kosher, and the one isn't kosher. If you find meat in the street, according to that, you can consider it kosher on the principle that it's 90% kosher and probably likely. So in terms of ritual law, we go by the majority, but not regarding monetary damages. Okay? Do you have any question, Kev?
That's Betel Barov, is that what it's called?
The rule of the majority, I think it's called that. I don't know Hebrew.
That's Betel where you, same with when you drop a small drop in milk into a massive pot of soup. It doesn't nullify it.
Exactly. But in monetary disputes, we do not follow the principle of majority. Rather, the operative principle is that the one seeking to exact payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof, even when the principle of the majority supports his claim. Okay. So we're saying there that basically it's an argument in Bava Basra 93a that the Gemara challenges Rav from our Mishnah, arguing that since the majority of pregnant cows do not miscarry on their own, we should assume that the miscarriage results from the goring. So what it's saying is Sumkus is obviously saying, look, we have to go according to the law of the majority. And the law of the majority actually supports Rav. And Shmuel supports the sages that disagree with Sumchus. Because Sumchus is saying, look, at the end of the day, it's unlikely that the fetus would just happen to die on its own at the exact moment, or at the exact close proximity of time where the goring took place, unless it suffered a physiological shock as a consequence. And therefore, we should, by all purposes, take the full money from the damager. But since we don't have evidence, irrefutable evidence, they both have to compromise half. Okay? As far as Shmuel is concerned, that the proof is from the damaged party to actually bring witnesses and say that the calf itself, the fetus itself, died as a result of the shock. That you can't rely on probability, you have to have witnesses. So Shmuel goes according to the rabbis, Rav goes more according to Sumchus and some of the rabbis, okay? So, rather the operative principle is the one that's seeking to exact payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof, even when this principle of majority supports his claim. The previous discussion began with Rabbi Yehuda's statement, okay, in the name of Shmuel, that a Mishnah's ruling is disputed. A brisa corroborates this assertion. It was taught similarly in a brisa: if an ox gored a cow that had been pregnant and killed it, and the cow's fetus was found dead at its side, but it is not known whether the cow gave birth to the fetus before the ox gored it, and the fetus' death is unrelated to the goring, or it gave birth after the ox gored it, and the goring caused it to miscarry. The owner of the ox must pay half damages for the cow, because for sure the cow's got a gaping hole in it, so you know it was gored. And you could see there were witnesses that just didn't notice the fetus. And 1/4 damages for the offspring. Why? Because if you had evidence that the fetus was killed as a result of the body shock, you also pay half for the fetus. You pay 1/4 because you don't pay nothing, because it's likely that the animal went into shock, and cows don't just lose offspring. But since you don't have evidence, you have to accept half of half, which is 1/4 damages. These are the words of Sumchus: the one seeking to exact payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof. Okay? So it would seem that the rabbis the sages say the one seeking payment from his fellow bears the burden of proof. Okay. So, guys, I think that's fairly clear. Let's end off on this note. I'm happy to. We've done a 40-minute shiur in total. That should be enough for today.